Welcome to Season 7 of Purposeful Empathy, a show that's dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from around the globe who believe the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. I'm joined by the fabulous Debra Kurtz, who is committed to the science of empathy. She earned her master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology from Touro University Worldwide and pursued graduate work at Johns Hopkins University in adult learning. Her primary research is centered around emotionally intelligent strategies to help people appreciate each other's diversity and build inclusive workplaces. As a former learning and development consultant and executive director of a private foundation, Debra's had the opportunity to apply her academic background and empathetic communication skills while engaging her clients and thousands of global nonprofit stakeholders. Today, as Chief Empathy Officer of Conscious Empathy, she uses empathy and research to share the art of heart with leaders and teams. Welcome so much to the show, Debra.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to unpack all of this. The art of heart. I love that. Okay.
Art of heart at work.
At work.
We'll do that too. Yeah.
We'll do that too. All right. So as soon as we connected, we immediately started using vocabulary together of like, let's geek out on empathy together. So I'm really excited to geek out on empathy with you. I want to know because I think for you, you make a distinction between empathic and empathetic.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could share what the distinction is for you.
I do picture empathy as a spectrum. And I think at this end, we have people who are naturally empathic. They're not working to create it. It's almost like breathing, right? It comes out. For me as an empathic, a highly sensitive person, I don't have to think about it. It's there. What I have to think about, and that's when I became enamored with the concepts of conscious empathy, is how not to become overwhelmed and to take that pause, which gives me a little bit of distance from being too overcome by the emotions. At the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are not empathetic. They don't understand the concept of thinking about somebody else's feelings or somebody else's emotions, or even expressing it in a way so that the other person knows that they are feeling with them or for them. So I think that being empathetic is something that we can almost train for and learn more about and practice, whereas I don't believe we have to practice to be empathic. I believe that that's part of the natural hardwiring.
Oh, that's fascinating. I've never heard that explained before. I've been asked, what's the difference? And I say one has one fewer syllables, and that's why I go with that. So, okay.
That's true too. There's nothing wrong in that. But to me, that's where the consciousness comes in, because at one end, that pause, or like Ethan Kross talks about chatter, his book Chatter, and distancing. In that moment that we give a little bit of distance internally and give our brain a rest, we can create enough distancing so that, for example, anxiety or distress can be toned down a little bit. Now, I'm not saying that's going to cover all of it, and I have plenty of anxiety in my life, so I'm not going to claim that works. But I do understand just taking that pause, that deep breath, gives you a moment to get yourself together. For people at the other end of the spectrum, they are going to have to take that pause and go, or say, okay, I see they're not comfortable. How come they're not comfortable? What could I do or say to make them more comfortable? And that's when we get into empathetic leadership and trying to encourage people to say, how can I help? Mm-hmm. And the research around being empathetic is, are we coming across to people or aren't we? We have, as you well know, so I'm just trying to explain it more for the people who are watching than for you.
Totally.
Because I know you get this. There's cognitive empathy. We can think about it. Oh, I get it. We have affective empathy. Okay, now I'm feeling an emotion. It could be happiness. It could be distressful, like watching the war in Ukraine on television, right? There's not a person. Well, there are people, but for the most of us, we feel terrible distress at watching somebody else's suffering. But it doesn't help the people in the Ukraine unless I take action. And that's when the empathy becomes conscious. It is empathy in action. Some people call that compassion. Some people call that empathic concern. In the workplace, now we have to get to that place where we, as Jamil Zaki calls it, a motivated phenomenon. I have a couple of choices. I can see that you're in distress and keep right on walking because I don't want to get into that mess. Or I can say, I see that there's a problem here. Okay, I'm going to step forward. And yeah, it might be messy, might be something I'm not used to, but I'm going to ask the question, which will engage the other person and say, I see you're having a difficult time. Is there something that you want to talk about? Is there something that I can help you with? And that emotional acknowledgement, great research by Allison Yu and Justin Zlotev out of Stanford have talked about emotional acknowledgement actually is the basis for creating trust in the workplace. Because the minute that you get involved and it is messy, you're showing, okay, I'm open to your vulnerability and I'm listening. And if I can help, I'm going to. But I see you, I hear you, and I want to learn more. And their research has shown that just that emotional acknowledgement creates trust, as opposed to those of us who've worked and somebody goes, well, sucks for you, right? Who do you want to work with?
So would it be fair to say, like, your framing of conscious empathy, which I think is really brilliant, is similar to mindful empathy, like actually just that pause that you talk about before you react or before you respond, so that you are imagining how things might land for the other person and also how it's feeling for you. Just that pregnant pause that you're talking about, that conscious empathy. Is that just becoming aware of how you're feeling and how you imagine somebody else might be feeling? Is that what it's about?
Well, I think the conscious empathy definitely has that component of awareness. And for us to become aware, we do have to become mindful. That's what emotional intelligence is, right? We have that self-regulation and we have the regulation of other. And once we understand who we are, it's easier for us to extend empathy to somebody else. It's not threatening. It doesn't create envy, which is more research. Denisha, I'm going to mess up her name, Ganagadone. I apologize, Denisha, wherever you are in Australia, who's talked about positive empathy, right? Because for the cohesion of a team, that kind of empathy being more positive, I know who I am and I can celebrate you getting a promotion or being recognized at work. It doesn't make me less of a human being. It doesn't make me less of who I am. I'm secure enough in myself to say, I can be happy for you. And when we get our teams to that level, that's when they're working together. That's collaboration, as opposed to envy, which is we don't share resources, we block communication, we don't share knowledge, and the team's not working to a universal purpose. So there is that mindfulness, but there is also that awareness for others. So I think it's a combination of mindfulness, but still that concept of empathy is still taking that action, that motivated phenomenon.
Today's episode was brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. There is research even prior to the pandemic that showed people leave their jobs because of their bosses, by and large. And
Yes.
Toxic workplaces cost companies money, they cost industries and sectors money, and it's the churn of turnover and the hiring and all of that
Absolutely.
is resources wasted. So let's talk a little bit about toxic workplaces. I mean, you've lived your own personal experience, I understand, and you do coaching now with leaders and you talk about how to create more empathetic cultures. that sort of, really move out of toxicity into something where everybody feels heard and comfortable and validated. So tell me a little bit more about this.
Okay. So research out of MIT that was conducted by Charles and Donald Sull, they used natural language processing to go through millions of Glassdoor reviews, which in the United States is a website where people who can leave comments about their organization. What was the experience? What do they think of the management? What do they think of the life-work balance, and so forth? So they went through millions and millions of responses, and from it, they culled the topics or the reasons where people left. And the number one reason, after sorting all of these massive amounts of data, is that a toxic workplace is the reason that people leave. And there's research from the Workplace Bullying Institute in the United States. There's a lot of terrific research out of Holland and Einerson and Zapp. All these people have been writing about bullying for years and years. What is it? What does it entail? How does it affect the workplace? Christine Pearson and Parath, who write about incivility, which is almost a state before we get to that fully dysfunctional environment. But it was the lack of respect that affected people, that verbal abuse. And I think it's not really surprising that we knew it existed before. We weren't coping well with it before. The research has showed us, in fact, how it's affected employees physically, psychologically, behaviorally. But now we've been faced with this life-threatening environment. We're living on hypervigilance, aware that if we share a table with our parents or our children, we could be killing somebody. So all of a sudden, we're looking at our work life and saying, I can't do this. I have one life and life is short. I don't want to live this way. I want to do something different. And I think that's part of certainly what has fueled the Great Resignation. And I think that's why empathetic leadership has come out on top in research by Catalyst and McKinsey and Gallup. People would rather work for an empathetic leader and take a reduction in pay because it's a completely different experience.
So, okay, you've mentioned workplace bullying, and we all know bullying, schoolyard kids, right? There's some dynamics that play out. In the workplace, there's power asymmetries all over the place because you have structures where you're reporting to people and people can put pressure on you. You feel the financial pressure of possibly losing your job, all of that, right? It's a really, really much more complex kind of bullying. What do you think people don't know about workplace bullying that you might want to share?
One of the very sad facts, which leads back to what you talked about, people leaving their managers or their bosses, 65% of the time, bullying is from a supervisor to a subordinate. That's heart-wrenching. Workplace bullying isn't just physical or sexual harassment, right? We've been through Me Too, and people think, okay, well, that means they're slashing my tires or they're making unwanted advances. Bullying, and in the research, the most distressing part of it is the rumors, the lies, the things that are said behind our back, the reputations that we're affecting, right? We go into the workplace, our integrity, our character is what we have to our name. It's how we represent ourselves with our colleagues, with our customers, with our clients. And workplace bullying literally tears down people's self-esteem. And those lies and those rumors go round and round. But what it does is it tears people down psychologically. We see more incidences of health issues like gastrointestinal problems, migraines, chills, shakes, heart palpitations, heart attack, diabetes. All of these link back to the psychological influences, depression. PTSD is rampant in certain environments that are unfortunately have become toxic workplaces. We know what's happened in the medical industry, to our first responders, in education. Unfortunately, there are these toxic environments that grow, and people are afraid to speak up because there's tenure. One of the other things that's so terrifying is that people are afraid to speak up. We have created such an environment of fear, they won't tell anybody. Mm-hmm. And those who speak up, according to the research, are bullied longer, which is really so counterintuitive. We want to speak up, but instead, those people are punished. Right. The target has already been punished, but not punished enough. It's your fault for speaking up. We're going to get rid of you. We're not going to address the issues. We're going to get rid of you. And they do end up having their jobs threatened or being fired. The longitudinal research has also showed that the longer people were being bullied in these really miserable, abusive, toxic environments, the longer it took for their psychological health to return. And one study showed up to 5 years after leaving that particular environment.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it's the people who have spoken to me, they're the ones being bullied. They feel guilt and shame. I had one person say to me, "I'm so sorry I had to leave my work friends there, but it was an act of self-preservation."
Right.
People should not be dying to go to work. You mentioned something in a separate conversation about us problem solving. And it was so right on, because in the workplace, that's what we're doing. And particularly leaders, they're constantly fighting fires. And I need a solution, and I need it now. Be decisive, do this, solve the problems. When you are in that reactive state, you're not even comprehending what anybody else needs or what anybody else is going through or how long it's been. All you know is, I've got to solve it. I got to do it in 10 minutes. Cut them off at the knees. That doesn't solve the issue. It doesn't heal the workplace. It doesn't make it collaborative or functional. So for some, it has to start with awareness. For others, as you mentioned, there is the business case for a toxic workplace. The numbers have told us, and you know this, 1.5 to 2 times the business case is estimated, the cost of hiring somebody and their salary to replace them. That's not even dealing with the human cost of bringing somebody in, disrupting everybody, bringing somebody else, disrupting everybody. And it takes about 6 months to get over that learning curve with a new employee. But researchers out of Harvard said, organizations talk about those I heard somebody say hypo once, and I had to ask what they meant because there's so many high potential employees. And organizations have said, well, it's worth it for that estimated $5,000 to support the high potential employee. Well, the same researchers from Harvard said it actually costs $12,500 in savings when you get rid of a toxic employee. Mm-hmm. So again, it's what can we see versus what we can't see, and really getting a bird's eye view.
Debra, I've really enjoyed this conversation. The last question I usually ask my guests as we come to a conclusion is if you can share a story or a time when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
I had an experience many, many years ago. We were living in Canada at the time, and my husband and I were going to take a trip. We decided, based on the circumstances and what worked out for us, we were going to go to a resort in Jamaica. Now, we have food restrictions and dietary allergy type. We just got used to the fact we're going to have to bring food with us. It's just one of those things. You don't want to stay home. You want to travel. Okay, we'll just adapt. When we went to this particular resort in Jamaica, and I will give a shout out because I don't know where he is today, Chef Timothy Wood, who trained in Montreal, wherever you are today, thank you. We got there, and as soon as we got there, we got a message to come and see him. So we went to see him, and he said, "I'd like you to follow me into the kitchen." He said, "These are the hundreds of dollars of groceries that I've ordered for you from Miami. Here's the list. I want you to see. Here are the separate pots and pans that I have purchased so that none of your foods will touch any of the other things that we have in this kitchen. And I want you to see I'm keeping this in a separate place. But he also said, I want you to be able to enjoy the best of your trip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out menus with you, special foods every single night, but I'm going to serve them to you in a different restaurant setting so that you can have the ambiance and the experience. And he directed the waiters every night, take this off the table, take this off the table, but served us the most beautiful, heartfelt, gorgeously created food just for the two of us, right? You want to look at each other and go, well, does he have any idea we can pay like that much money? Like, why is he doing this? He made sure that even though it was just the two of us, it was the most wonderful experience just because we were traveling and we could enjoy, and he understood how he could make it memorable for us through his own abilities. And I thank you, Timothy Wood, wherever you are, for making us feel like $1 million instead of like a problem. So that was a big, purposeful, empathetic week for us. It was a whole...
That is such a beautiful memory. That is such a lovely way to end our conversation on such a sweet note. I wish I could taste some of that food. Thank you so much.
It was beautiful.
Lovely. Well, good luck with conscious empathy, and thank you so much for taking the time today. And we appreciate all our viewers and listeners. We'll see you next time at Purposeful Empathy. What if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free from your thinking clutter, make that important decision, or liberate you from whatever is holding you back? At Grant Huron International, you get to choose the coach of your choice anytime from anywhere. Visit granthuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.